Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us today. On behalf of the Hawaii Council of the Humanities, we are so happy that you could join us and be a part of this unique speaker series that is focused on looking at different Hawaii topics related to debate and diplomacy, successes, failures, and consequences, which is this year's National History Day theme that we are affiliate of. In this speaker series, we'll be diving deeper to illuminate Hawaii's histories, stories, and people by its people. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our three amazing speakers and community leaders. First is Larie Manutai, who works for Council Member Augie T, Dorian Langi, our Master Teacher and NHD Ambassador, and Dr. Ellen Ray Kachola, who is the Archives Manager at the University of Hawaii School of Law Library. Now I will turn it over to Larie, who will be speaking on fishing, land, and health rights alongside with Dorian. Thank you, Larie.
Aloha, and thank you for having me. Actually, my mom is Dorian Langi, and I'm really happy to be here with you folks today and just share a little bit, some ideas that your students can use that have to do with either fishing rights, land rights, or public health. Those were the things we decided to focus on. But I'm actually going to turn it to my mom first, Mrs. Langi.
So I think before we really start, we need to have a clear definition of what debate, diplomacy, successes, failures, and consequences are. And I put together a list of words that I like to think of as debates. A lot of teachers have been saying to me this year, I'm struggling to find a topic. And Amy Boning said to me, well, if they think of last year's topic of conflict and compromise, debate and diplomacy should be real. But they can also think of debate as being a sacrifice, not, a fight, an organized argument, a public meeting. It could, it could have 2 or 3 different sides. It could have different opinions. Diplomacy. Diplomacy, normally when we think of diplomacy, we immediately jump to international relationships, but it doesn't have to be the topic this year. It does not have to do with something international. It could have been a conference. It could have been a negotiation. It's a way of maintaining peaceful relationships between groups and individuals. What I liked about looking up this word diplomacy was the word poise, well-mannered, sensitive, dialogue. And I think as students, if you think of diplomacy this way, you won't be thinking of World War II. We're going to start by going into fishing rights. And I love fishing rights. I am not an expert on it, but the one thing that I like about fishing rights is I can go down to the beach, a public beach, most of the beaches around Oahu, set up my fishing pole and not worry about somebody telling me that it's illegal to fish off of the beach. But it was not always like this. In the beginning, we had the ahupua'a. And the ahupua'a was run by the konohiki. And the konohiki, this ahupua'a ran from the mountain to the reef, the beginning of the reef. And all that area in between that ahupua'a was run by this konohiki. And then along came King Kamehameha III, and he decided to make a change, and he divided it 3 ways. He gave the common man a third of the land and the ahupua'as. He gave the konohiki a third, and he kept a third for the royal families. One of the things that when you're thinking about the konohiki fishing rights, if this is a topic that you're interested in, these are points that you need. This PowerPoint will be left for you, is to really get into the Organic Act, which there were 2 clauses in the Organic Act, 95 and 96, which was the intent of Congress to destroy the fishing rights in Hawaii. Also, if you're interested in this, you should also look up statehood and the protection of marine ecosystems. One story I would like to tell you about is a man by the name of Samuel Miles Damon. And he was a son of a missionary, and he was given by Bernice Pauahi Bishop, Moana Lua. And Moana Lua was from an ahupua'a from the mountain to the ocean. And people wanted to actually fish on his land. And so he took it, he had a debate, he took it to court, he was upset about it. He wanted the people, if you decided to fish on your land, he wanted a third of that. And he was able to get past he lost in the lower courts, but he actually won in the Supreme Courts to have this konohiki rights, fishing rights of being able to charge you or, you know, have you give him fish for the land. Now, the interesting or the sad thing about his is during the 1940s, the military came in and took over his fishing, in a sense, his land, his fishing rights, and we now know that as Pearl Harbor. Now, another thing about the fishing rights is the Hawaiians now have come back and they're really trying to talk about harvesting, and they want to learn some of these methods and everything. And so they created this CBSFA group, and they started this Mo'omomi project. So if you're interested in fishing rights, this might be a topic that you might be interested in. This is actually a group that is trying to bring back the old fishing methods and introduce fishing techniques back into Hawaii and trying to save the fishing. Larie, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about some of the problems that we're having.
So I'm going to talk about more current things. If you have students that are interested in learning in presenting on topics that are within, the last couple of years. The first one is not, but one of the things that may interest them is how beach access, public beach access was established in Hawaii. And you may or may not know, but Chief Justice William S. Richardson, who was the first Native Hawaiian Chief Justice, he actually legislated from the bench and created this right for all people to be able to access beaches freely. Growing up as a boy in Hawaii, he loved to surf and he enjoyed the ocean very much. But as hotels began to develop and fill Waikiki Beach, they would essentially cut off access to people wanting to get onto the beach. And I'm not sure if any of you own beachfront property, but if you look at your deed will show that you own from where your house is all the way into the ocean. And that's something that still is litigated today, because people are like, well, my deed says I own the ocean. I mean, the beach, the sand, and everything into the ocean, but you actually you can't exercise rights over it because of this particular court case that William S. Richardson basically legislated from the bench on. And so in this opinion, I don't have the name of the case, which I should have gotten for you, but I can, if any of you want to follow up, I can give you my contact information. But he took the opportunity to create this access right because and based it on customary practices that in an ahupua'a, everyone had, the opportunity to go to the beach and to be able to access the beach. And so unlike other states in the US, in Hawaii, you cannot restrict beach access. And so if you have students who love to surf, if you have students who just love to go to the beach and hang out, this is one of the things that may interest them. Some other things that may be of interest to your students if they fish. Currently in Hawaii, many of the fishing laws are regulated through the Department of Land and Natural Resources. They regulate when you can fish, what you can fish, how you fish. And a lot of people don't know that. I used to be a public defender, and I had many clients who would just go and, start fishing for lobster, and you can only do it in certain seasons. Or they didn't know that when they take opihi, it has to be at least 2 inches or bigger, and so it's, if you have students that are interested in fishing, it's a good opportunity to look at that. Another thing that comes with ocean, and many of you may know about that girl who had come to Hawaii to visit and touch the seal. We have a lot of endangered species or animals that are living around and come and visit our island. And many people aren't aware of the laws or how these laws came about. And so that might be another interesting topic for your students, because I'm sure many of them who are on TikTok probably saw that clip of the girl touching the seal or the guy touching the turtle. So those are some things that may be of interest to your students.
We're going to go into land issues. And of course, we have to start with the Great Mahele. where King Kamehameha III again, you know, divided out the land. One of the interesting things with this Great Mahele and this era was that the foreigners really wanted private ownership. And the common man was used to being under the rule of his konohiki. And many konohiki told them not to do anything. And many, when they had the opportunity, I believe it was a 2-year period, they didn't sign up. They did not get their plot. So majority of the Hawaiians did not, you know, were not able to sign up and get land during this time. Let me see, I'm going to go to the next one, Larie. Did you want to talk about, I'll go to the next one and then, oh wait, let me go back. There are many, many different ones that the students might be interested in. Here's one on Kalama, the Kalama Valley protest, where originally it started with these poor pig farmers, these poor people that really wanted to be able to save their land. And if they're thinking about doing this project, they really should look up Kokua Hawaii, because that was the organization that helped them move forward. And here's some other topics that go with that. The Waihole Waikani protest is another one that students might be interested in. The Makua Valley, where, you know, the bombing, to stop the bombing and get their land back, was another one. The protest on Ko Olao, we're going to be having one of the talks coming up will be on this in the next couple months. And I'm going to turn it over to Larie, and she's going to start with the State of Hawaii Land Use Commission.
Oh, okay. Before we get into that, kind of going back to Kuleana landowners, some of the issues that your students may want to dive into is Mark Zuckerberg, who is the founder and CEO of Facebook. And when I lived on Kauai, that's when they were going through his court case where he was trying to do declarative judgments against Kuleana landowners. And so diving into that and fleshing out some of the issues, because there were a lot of people against it and a lot of people who were like, well, that's his right. So, you know, going through those types of policy issues and seeing, having your students do a deep dive into that may be of interest to them. Another thing that was that kind of gets touched on through the Waihole Valley protest, the Kalama Valley or Makua Valley, is your students could look into the ceded lands and crown lands debate, which continues to go on. There are a lot of, there's a really good, what would you call it? Like, not a podcast, but on YouTube, there's a presentation done by this professor in Maui that your students, that may be of interest to them if they're interested in learning about how the crown lands became ceded lands and what's going on with that now. Also the Department of Hawaiian Homelands and their mission to build homes for Hawaiian people. And then brings us to, so now pivoting to the Land Use Commission in the state of Hawaii, when it comes to property, the way that you are able to use your property, the things that you can do on your property all go through the State Land Use Commission. And so having your students learn about the various types of land use. One of the things in the Hawaii State Constitution, Mom, if you can go to the important ag lands. So in under the Hawaii State Constitution, there's a protection for the importance of our natural resources, protection of our natural resources. And one of the things that happened in 2005 was the state legislature passed this bill called, this measure called they call it the important agriculture lands. And so what happens is land that is already designated under zoning as agriculture, they've given rights to the city to go and designate certain agriculture lands as important ag lands. And what happens is it further restricts, it adds more restrictions onto owners of agriculture land. So right now, if you're living in the city and county of Honolulu, there's actually the important ag land designation or declarations are going through right now. And there's been a lot of debate on that. And so your students would have the opportunity to actually read both sides, to see what's coming out as far as the important ag lands debate. Can we go to the affordable housing? So another thing that has to deal with land in Hawaii is our homeless crisis. and the lack of affordable housing. And what another key issue that's going to be coming up within the next month, there was actually a hearing yesterday at the Planning Commission regarding short-term rentals and the impact of short-term rentals. This is like transient vacation units, but the impact of that on our housing, our affordable housing, or the housing availability. And there's going to be a lot of debate coming out as this amendment to the current city charter tries to get passed to further control this issue that we have with short-term rentals.
We're going to move into public health. And I got a couple of pictures that I thought, so of course it was King Kamehameha III who established the Department of Health in 1850. And I thought that this was really funny. It happened in the 40s, but if you see this, the image there, there's a man spraying insect spray in the airplane to prevent mosquitoes and insects coming into Hawaii. And then the other picture is a man collecting disease information from these passengers. And I was just thinking, gee, you know, we're still having this problem today. But one of the things that happened was when when Captain Cook came, there were over 250,000 Hawaiians living on the islands. And when King Kamehameha III put into place the Department of Health, our population was down by 50%. And by 1890, there were only 40,622 Hawaiians left in the islands. And so it was really, really important to have this Department of Health. But there are many cases that if students are interested in health issues that they could look at. And the first one that I'm highlighting is the Ko Olao Rebellion, where this man, Ko Olao, did not want to leave his family on Kauai and be moved to Kalapapa. And of course, in this incident, the sheriff was killed by the leper. The students, you know, could look into this and realize that he was then, you know, moved on to Molokai, and you know they could study the debate and diplomacy in that issue. Another one is this Chinatown bubonic plague. One of the interesting things about this is the Board of Health did step in. They put out a strict quarantine, and then the National Guard came in, and at it says point of the bayonets, that you know they fumigated, they stripped these residents down to be naked, fumigated them, and you know, and all the things that happened, you know, for this bubonic plague, and the merchants just lost had so many losses with that incident. Another one that is very prevalent today, and because of the 1978 Constitutional Convention, the Native Hawaiian healer rights have come back into play, and it is a good topic if students would be interested in. The interesting one that I like to bring out is this story about Luka Kinalau, who had been raised to become a herbal doctor under the Hawaiian and tried her best for many, many years, and she was denied a license. And her story is you know, it's definitely fits into this debate and diplomacy, as now she was able to, in the end, you know, finally be able to get her license. Larie, I'm going to turn the time over to you to talk about martial law and some of these things.
So in the state of Hawaii, so I work at City Council, and right now, you may or may not know, we are currently listening to a resolution regarding, so the mayor has already announced a vaccine, well, sort of like a vaccine passport, but an option for, anyways, without getting too much into the weeds. There's a lot of things regarding quarantines and regulations that have been put in place by the mayor, by the governor, and on the different islands, and it varies from island to island. One thing that may be of interest to your students is finding out how the governor has this power, how the mayor has this power. A lot of things, one thing that always comes out in the debates or in testimony is, you know, people saying like this is unconstitutional. And so finding out, are vaccine mandates constitutional? That may be of interest to your students. Also, what was it? I think I'm kind of like all over the place right now. But under HRS 127A, that's where the governor gets the authority to create emergency proclamations. And once he does that, he then designates powers. So he holds emergency power, but under his office, but he can also designate it to the mayor of each county. So when it comes to an emergency situation in your county, the person that's in charge is your mayor. And so that is why you have rules coming through the mayor to further protect the different jurisdictions or the different areas in which you live. And so, you know, there's a lot of misunderstanding about that. And so having your students do a deep dive into what quarantine laws exist, you know, why they exist, are they legal? You know, what is the purpose for them? You know, why does the government care about public health? Those kinds of things. And then also quarantine or emergency proclamations are not just for, you know, like a pandemic or public health. There's also whenever there's an actual natural disaster or like flooding. There was a lot of flooding on Kauai when I lived there. The governor will issue an emergency proclamation because it'll also trigger, you know, the National Guard to come and assist with the effort, or monies coming from the federal government that would allow, you know, more resources to flow into a certain area so that they have various resources to deal with the natural disaster or the pandemic. Let me see, was there anything else we were gonna say on that? I think, I just wanted to, I know our time is wrapping up, but one of the things when I was speaking with Mrs. Langi yesterday, and I was telling her, one of the things that I find interesting in the debates that are going on today is when the pandemic, I don't know if you guys can think back to when the pandemic first started, but a lot of the instructions that we were being given, the guidelines that were coming out, were much the same as they were 100 years ago. Wash your hands, wear a mask, social distance, you know, take care of yourself. And I was telling my mom, it's so interesting to see that, you know, here we are 100 years later, and a lot of the guidelines are still kind of the same. And listening to the debates, and especially when it comes to vaccine mandates, there were so many people today who were testifying at the city council, so passionate. You know, it is a very divisive topic for a lot of people. And I was telling Mrs. Langi, what I hope for your students is that as they discover and as they learn about, and as they research and learn more about diplomacy and solutions, that hopefully, you know, we're here 100 years later, hopefully they can bring new ideas, new solutions to our government. Because honestly, like, that is, from where I'm sitting, that's what I see is missing. And so I hope that your students, through their work, they can know that, man, we do need help in government, and we do need new ideas. And I love that students have that ingenuity, they have that creativity. They're not like us adults who are, you know, a lot of times constrained by what we've learned, or, you know, our inability to change our ways. And so I hope that through this process, your students are inspired to bring new ideas to our government. And hopefully those are things that we can share with our council members, with our legislators, with our mayors, and with our governor.
Thank you so much, Larie and Dori, for your presentation. And for those that don't know, this is Dori and Larie gave a high-level overview of these different topics. And for the rest of the series, we're going to be diving deeper with experts on Ko Olao and land rights, Maui water rights, with experts coming. So the next few weeks will be going more in depth. So, and then.